Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 630. WMAL.
7:07 on a Monday morning. The whole gang is back. Joe DiGENOVA, our legal expert, is here as well. And I have to tell you, Joe, I was thinking about you on my vacation.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Aww. You're a sad guy.
I know. I am a sad guy. But I was thinking about you because I took the boys fishing, really their first official fishing trip. Yeah. And we caught 2 fish. It was great. They're about 5 inches, not quite as big as the one that you like to catch.
That's pretty spectacular stuff, though, for kids catching. The last time we went fishing, we ended up with the grandkids, and we caught 6 beautiful rockfish in the Chesapeake, the largest of which was 43.5 inches long.
Wow. Yeah, that's about 40 inches longer than the one we caught.
Gracious.
Yeah, but the problem was that when we kept it outside the water a little bit too long to take the pictures to prove that we caught it, and it may have died before we threw it back in the water. We're not going to get in trouble for that, are we? We had an official license.
You just said it on the air,
man. It didn't happen.
I'm sorry. Well, I'll just play ignorant. All right. I wanted to ask you, did you see Mitch McConnell's comments the other day on Fox News Sunday where he said the Casey Anthony case is exactly why he's against civilian trials for terror suspects, essentially saying that it's very difficult to get a conviction in a U.S. court. Is that the proper analogy, or is that a crude analogy for Mitch McConnell?
Actually, it's not a bad analogy at all. You will recall the last big terrorist case tried in the Southern District of New York. There were 248 counts, and the terrorist was acquitted on 247 of those counts. The reason it's hard to convict people is because it's supposed to be. Civilian trials are designed to make the government need the very heavy burden of beyond a reasonable doubt, proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Military commissions and the Guantanamo trials are not designed that way. They are not designed to be civilian trials. And that's why the appropriate place for enemy combatants, legal or illegal, is in military commissions. This thing with the guy that they caught on the put on the cruiser for 2 months and interrogated the Somali guy, and then secretly brought him to the Southern District of New York. Let me just tell you something. They are cruising for a bruising legally and constitutionally. The New York delegation is not happy. The mayor of New York is not happy, and I can tell you the police commissioner of New York is not happy. McConnell was right. He was absolutely right.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the Somali terrorist accused terrorist, brought in on the boat. So he was held for 2 months and interrogated. Right. Secretly, and now he's got full Miranda rights? Is that right? I just don't understand the logic behind how we're treating this guy. You either go one way or the other, don't you?
Well, there is no logic. What this is all about is they did not want to bring him to Guantanamo because they don't want to ever bring another terrorist to Guantanamo, because under the law they cannot now move that terrorist to the United States for a civilian trial. So what they did was they evaded the statute by bringing him directly from the battleship to the Southern District of New York.
And humanely holding him for 2 months in secret, right?
Yes, but here's the other thing they did. They think that they legally were then able to stop talking to him after 2 months, after gathering intelligence, wait a week, then have a new FBI team come in and talk to him for the criminal trial and interrogate him after reading him Miranda rights. They are going to have their case thrown out in New York. It's going to be worse than having an acquittal. They're not even going to get to a trial. No judge is going to allow this case to go forward under the circumstances in which he was held.
Well, then what do you think is going to happen to him?
He will be eventually either, according to the testimony on Capitol Hill last week by the admiral in charge of these projects, he will be, if no country will take him, he will be released.
He will be released. Because
the government, because they've said they're not going to bring any more prisoners to Guantanamo. They're either going to have to turn him over to his home government or get some other government to take him, or he will be released. This is the triumph of ideology over fighting a war.
So we hold a guy for a couple of months, give him his Miranda rights, try to try him in the U.S., not going to happen, and we're going to release who we know was a Somali pirate. Just put him back in the open, throw the fish back in the water, to use the analogy.
This is just because they don't want to send another prisoner to Guantanamo. It is lunacy. It is insanity, and because the president is unable to fulfill his campaign promise of closing Guantanamo, which everyone knew he would never be able to do, but nonetheless, he lied about it during the campaign to get the lefty base all excited, and they're not real happy about him right now and about what he's done. But this is what you do when you don't really want to fight a war.
All right, I got a question for you. It goes to this Casey Anthony verdict that came down, and the jurors who initially said they didn't want to talk to reporters, but a couple, I think, have now spoken to reporters. Well, apparently, there's a story out here that says that one juror who's age 60 has quit work and fled town out of fear for her life. Apparently, it says that, you know, in addition to being hounded by the press, she has been receiving some death threats and has been unable to work since she was handed down the verdict. Joe, you know, it's one of the most important things that we as citizens can do is to serve on a jury. But I got to tell you, if I was called for to be a juror on a trial like this, of this kind of prominence, I'm not sure that I would show up.
Well, notorious cases like this always cause problems. Sometimes you have hyper jurors who want to become famous and use their service as jurors to do and say things both during the case, while they are jurors, and after the case, after either an acquittal or a conviction. This woman, and I've seen most of these jurors who just the one or two that have spoken, they seem like intelligent, responsible people. It's not the verdict that I would have reached based on what I read and saw. But I agree with some of the commentators who said this is one of those cases where the jurors could have gone either way, and they decided, because they were apparently unimpressed by the prosecution's case, you know, to vote for acquittal. I mean, they clearly could have voted for manslaughter and child abuse. I don't know what in the world possessed them, but I think after being cooped up for a couple of months, which is what's one of the things that's wrong with sequestration, I think they wanted to get the hell out of the courthouse. And that's why that verdict took a very short period of time. There was not a lot of deliberation. But jurors like this can, you know, they're just ordinary citizens. They're not prepared for the type of pressure and the type of attention that comes from a case like this. They're not trained for it. It's one thing for a lawyer like
Is there anything that you could do within the legal system to help them out once they've served?
No, because the legal system doesn't care about them. It cares about them for a little while. If they're in a huge terrorism case, for example, their names are kept. This has happened up in New York. You know, Judge Mukasey, who tried the big terrorism case in New York, was under Marshall's protection, and he still is. 8 years later, he's still under Marshall's protection. Some of the jurors have requested protection and gotten it in those cases. Sometimes witnesses will get protection. But the costs associated with that are astronomical. And in state cases like this, the states are simply not going to do anything about it.
But do you think that we've come to the point with CSI and DNA evidence that unless you have really hardcore evidence linking somebody to the murder, that it's difficult for a jury, especially when it's a death penalty case, to say, yeah, that person is guilty and we're going to execute them?
It is. It's exactly right, Brian. It's called the CSI effect among people who try cases. And jurors want fingerprints. They want blood. They want DNA. They want every conceivable piece of technical evidence because they see it every night on television, and they think that's the real world. Well, of course, it isn't the real world. That's not the way crimes are generally solved. I mean, of course, technology and science plays a role in almost every criminal case in some form, but not every case can be solved that way. And in this case, for example, a very smart criminal made sure that that baby's body was going to decompose in a place where no one would find it, so that there would be no DNA, and there would be no ability to do analysis and to determine the cause of death. Remember, the prosecution could not prove what the cause of death was in the Casey Anthony case. So, I mean, this is, big notorious cases create bad law and bad problems for the criminal justice system, but they're a reality, and, there's not much you can do about it. Jurors are very demanding these days. And that's part of it. We've educated them. We've made them understand that there are scientific methodologies that are available to help solve crimes. And when those methodologies are not available in a given case, they say to themselves, well, the government didn't live up to its standards. Thank you, television. Thank you, Hollywood.
All right, Joe. Good to talk to you as always. We'll do it again.